we are starting this afternoon with a panel on sustainable supply chains, which will be moderated by our guest moderator, Irini Atimu, Global Advisor in Sustainability, ESG and Supply Chain, which makes my life an awful lot easier. Joining Irini is Katie Ferrier, Regional Director for UKI and MEA at Achilles, the sponsors for this presentation, Tony Watson, Director of Procurement at Accord Healthcare, and Tom Trostrud, VP of Procurement for Hurtigruten. Over to you, Irini.
So, good afternoon from me, and thank you very much for joining today. And thank you very much for allowing me to be the moderator, and I hope that I make your life easier. So we will start today's discussion with Katie, please, if you would like to make your open comment, and then we will start with the introductions with the panel. We discuss sustainable supply chains. We heard a lot of this morning, so hope to contribute more to this strategic part of the organizations.
Thank you. Am I working? Hello? Any good? Yeah, that might be easier. Epic fail. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me here today. So, for my sins, I've spent 20 years working in procurement or supply chain, and I think only the grey hairs show it. And over the last 2 decades, we've seen so much change as procurement professionals. I can't imagine how it was 20 years ago when I first started as a junior buyer way back in the day, and all the focus was around cost efficiencies, and then we started to introduce safety. However, what I'm seeing today, and a recent survey by IBM of 3,000 chief executives showed that 48% of those chief executives still put sustainability right up there as one of the key things to talk about nowadays. However, when you kind of dig into it a bit more, only 23% of those chief executives have actually done much about it. And that means bringing organisations together to really drive that transformational change. So I think there's a massive gap between that ambition and what we're actually executing on the ground. I'd like to give you a bit of a reality check, because I think we talk about carbon quite a lot. But actually, if you think about modern slavery, there are over 50 million people enslaved today. There we go, no worries. And that's up, actually, 10 million from 5 years previously. I found that quite shocking in today's global environment. And the supply chains that we're all working with are increasingly more complex. And the biggest risks aren't actually the ones you know about, it's what you can't see. And when I speak to people in procurement around the world, I see that people have got so much data, they just don't know what to do with it. They can't uncover the real challenges that they're facing. The reality is the biggest concern, and the validity of that data. What we're seeing is lots of duplication across organisations and people struggling to bring that together. So what we're trying to do at Achilles is really turn that data into meaningful insights, shining a light where it's really difficult for you typically to explore your supply chains. And we're doing that at the minute with over 230,000 suppliers in 140 countries with 900 organisations. So I think we can say we actually do have quite a lot of information to assess. So why is that insight really important? Well, credible due diligence really does work. It does work in organisations, and it makes a difference. Organisations we work with have 50% carbon emission reductions in the first 5 years of working with us. They improve the performance across the organisation. That risk mitigation becomes part of the way they do business, not just an add-on. I talk about real examples, actually, because I think that's quite important. We were rolling out a global supply chain risk management process with a big global organisation. They'd got all the data, there were no red flags, the media wasn't flagging anything as concern. When we actually undertook an on-site audit for this organisation, we found bonded labour in Singapore. It's not somewhere where you would expect that. And we hear similar stories here in the UK and other places as well. Another example of how you can make that data really relevant, a top oil and gas organisation discovered that 5 fatalities and 25 major injuries occurred in just 3% of their supply chain. Having that data at their fingertips made them focus in on what is really important and take tangible action. So that's why I think data's great, but it's actually what you do with it and how you action it that's more important. I don't think sustainability is just about compliance. It's not just a tick box exercise anymore, and it's not avoidance of fines. It's really how we should be operating our business. It drives efficiency, it improves resilience, and it strengthens supplier relations in a way that has been really tricky to do in the past. So I don't think all the low-hanging fruit has gone. I think we can innovate and collaborate, and I think procurement is a really good function to start that conversation. And I really think if we work together, we can shine a light on those spaces that are really difficult to get to. And we build supply chains that aren't just looking for legal compliance, but are safer, fairer, and much more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. And it is very important, starting this discussion, not the what, but the how. So each organization, we know what they are doing. The important is how we do business. So, is it okay now? Great.
Testing.
So let's start first of all with some introductions. Tony first, and then Tom.
Sure. So thank you very much for the invitation to come and sit on a panel today. My name's Tony Watson. I'm Director of Procurement for Accord Healthcare. I have about 26 years, same amount of grey hair. My background stems across FMCG, so I work for The Body Shop, for L'Oreal, and I'm currently working for Accord Healthcare, looking after the procurement function. And what really strikes me is the difference when we talk about driving a sustainable supply chain, when we're working in FMCG and we've got the consumer on the outside starting to push what we want to do and how we want to change. Then we cross over to pharmaceutical. And I want to do just one little test. Okay, so I'd like everybody to put your hand in the air if in the last year you've been to the chemist or the pharmacist to collect a prescription medicine for you or for one of your family members. Just put your hands in the air if that's one of you. Okay, now keep your hands in the air if you knew where the medicine came from that you received from the pharmacist. I'm glad you're saying yes, because I can see a man from GSK over there. So what we've got is an area that does not have that consumer push to make change. It has to come from the inside out, and that's the real difference in pharmaceutical. We have to be responsible, and we have to be the change makers within our supply chains.
Thank you very much, Tony. Great start. Tom.
Yeah, a bit difficult to top that one. I'm Tom from Norway, Vice President for Procurement. Hurtigruten, I don't know if you heard about it. It's a 130-year-old company, cruise company. We basically, in the early days, we didn't have roads up in northern Norway, and we needed fish and postal voyages up north. So we actually built the country together by boats. And we continue that, so now they are medium-sized. They are small, so we can go into the fjords, and it's called the most beautiful voyage in the world. My role there is to get that ship running and get everything on the ship that needs to be there to have the best voyage in the world, the most sustainable as possible. So we're going to go through, probably going to get some questions about that, but one of the things that we actually do, we source as we go along the coast. So we have 34 ports from south to north, and we pick up food along the way. So basically, you can tell the guest, you know, the place that we stopped by yesterday, the food on your plate today is actually from that farm we just passed. So it's very local sourcing. Sustainability in regards to food are very important for us, and of course emissions, as ships tend to go on fuel.
Thank you very much. And pretty much you covered my first thought about what sustainable supply chain means for each one of you. So I would like then to ask, what is this point within an organization that decides that we need to have a sustainable supply chain? So definitely every organization, no matter the industry or the sector, needs supply chain. What is this point that defines the sustainable part?
It's an interesting question. I think sustainability, when I speak to people, means so many different things. If I go over to the Middle East, it's really focused on carbon emissions. If I come over to construction in the UK, it's all around ethical business and who we're employing, how do we know who we're employing, and are we putting them to work in a fair and transparent way. If we go further across to America, it's all about where are you sourcing your stuff from. is it an ethical place you're sourcing your goods and services from as well? So for me, it's really all-encompassing sustainability in organisations, and I think the most advanced ones who are actually doing a lot of that, and including health and safety into those metrics, your workforce as well, is bringing it together. And I do think procurement itself actually is a great change maker. It always has been, as long as I've been around. They're kind of the people that brings your engineers, brings your project managers, brings everyone in the organisation to really put something down on pieces of paper to define what it means to you. So I think until you've done that as an organisation, you don't really understand how to start on your journey. So that's always my recommendation, is to think about what it means to you, your business, your people especially, and how you take that forward.
That's great, Bon. Thank you very much. What about you, Tony?
It's such a wide question, isn't it? Like, where does it fit in? For me, I kind of adopt this idea as around a values-based procurement model. So sustainability can go almost any direction, but there's some really key pieces within the pharmaceutical world that need to make our supply chain sustainable. One clearly is compliance. So our medicines are taken day in, day out, without a question of the safety, the efficacy. We have absolute faith that we know this medicine's safe. You know, and I speak from experience. A couple of years ago, my stepdad was diagnosed with cancer, and as part of the treatment, one of the medicines was a medicine that we procured day in, day out. And for every day, you know, sadly, he passed away. And for every day, from that moment to the day he died, I injected him with one of our medicines, and I never questioned the safety and efficacy because I knew our supply chains were compliant. And that's part of that sustainability picture. It's really easy to label it, okay, right, we need to be environmentally correct, we really need to be socially correct. Yes, but we start with compliance. That becomes the foundation of making sure we have something that's going to be sustainable. And then we start to build on top of that the extra pieces of transparency down our supply chain to be able to understand the impacts it's having into the workforce, into the environment, and make sure we've got good governance around it to keep us where we want to take it, to make it, to where we want to take it.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, for Hurtigruten, I have to say, for the shipping company, our history comes back to that we're doing it for a purpose, and we're still fulfilling that purpose, but also have lots of guests on board. And everything we do, it's actually from the top down, saying, if we're going to source something, we need to know the origin and why it's there, and can we do it better with a different part or whatnot. For example, in our ships, they are not the used anymore, but instead of chucking them, we actually are hybridization. We're putting in battery packs on the ships, like a electric car, or not an electric car, but a hybrid car. So is that the smartest thing to do? Probably, because if you buy a new ship, it's going to have a lot more emissions, and maybe technology is coming further in the future. It's not free, it's pretty costly, and we are the pioneers. Nobody had done it before we did it. So what we do is we're trying to use what we have for the longest time period for if it fulfills what we want it to do. And that's for technology-wise for the ship, but also for, as I said earlier, about food or other criteria for us. We also do, for example, beach cleaning, or we do a ripple effect analysis, how much money we actually put in the local markets when we stop. Do we only put in the ship go in and we fuel, or we actually do the guests buy something in the local communities? Because that's also some worth. And due to that, new places want our ships to come, because they know that our guests are not just there to sit on the ship, they go ashore and use the community. So sustainability for us has been a journey, but procurement and sustainability go hand in hand, and that's the message from the top.
Thank you. And you mentioned sourcing, you mentioned transparency, and obviously ethical sourcing, transparency, supply chains are part of a business risk. And I would like to understand, let me know what is the role of technology in ensure that we can capture this and we secure that we have the transparency, we ensure that we understand the risks. Kitty?
Yeah, I think technology is going to be a key enabler for everyone involved in this going forwards, even more so than it is today. I mean, I spoke about 20 years ago when we were sending letters out to suppliers and asking them to fill questionnaires in and then putting them into spreadsheets and keeping folders full of stuff. We don't do that anymore, and actually the burden we put on the suppliers in terms of filling in questionnaires, we've got to get on top of that. So at Achilles, we're heavily investing in AI, in automation, but actually the core of it, you can't lose that transparency and the credibility of the data you're collecting. So it's all very well, I hate the word web scraping because it just doesn't work. You need to make trusted decisions, and the only way you can do that is the data is accurate and valid. So for us, it is about investing in the right way from a technology perspective, not just for the procurement staff making decisions, but for those poor suppliers who are filling in the information over and over again. So I'm trying to take that pain away from them as much as I can, and you can sort of watch this space because it's coming this year. And then actually using the data to make informed decisions. I don't want your teams, your procurement staff wasting time collecting information. I want them using the data that we've given insights to drive that decision-making process so it's more effective, and using agentic AI and all the great things that we've got through 30 years worth of audit data, for example. Let's use that in ways that we haven't been able to in the past. And I think that will take us to the next level where we all need to go.
That's great. Thank you.
And you said transparency, and that's exactly what it's all about, I think. We're blessed in a world with so much data. When we start to try to comprehend the level of data we're able to see and able to access now, we're so lucky that we've got AI come along just at the right time. So in pharmaceutical, it tends to be quite not secretive, it's not the right word, but very confidential supply chains. Everybody's very protective about their intellectual property, how they've managed to make a position. And when we're working in generic pharmaceutical, we have to work doubly hard to make sure that our supply chains are really transparent to allow us to be able to look down them and identify those risks that could be there. The world of big data means that now today, we can do that. We can access in real time where a specific ingredient, whether it's an API, whether it's an excipient, whether it's a piece of packaging, where it comes from all the way back, not quite to the field, but we're getting to that level because the data is there and it's working with partners who are able to develop the right AI agents to be able to look down, to pull that data and give it to us in something that we know is compliant, we know it's good data, and we're able to make strong decisions because of it.
I probably shouldn't say this, but sometimes I think it's too much data. We don't know what to do about it. For example, Scope 3 emissions. We have Scope 3 emissions data on every vendor in our vendor list, and 2,500 vendors. But is that correct data? Is activity-based or it's spend-based? If you do two calculations, you can say it's wrong data. So I think that we need to push the tech vendors to help us to get the correct data in a better way. Because if every company in the world is going to sit and measure or massage their data to get it correct, we're never going to get there. So I urge everyone out there to, if you can do that, come to me and we have a talk.
There's a really good piece though, isn't there? So you're right, yeah, there's so much data out there, but we have to bring in this level of data and then blend it with human relationships.
Exactly.
So it's that piece that sits in the middle that starts to interrogate each flow, each piece of information, say, actually, yeah, that I need to have an action as a result of that, yeah. Or I can predict something from that that's going to be tangible and viable for you.
Exactly, and sometimes you also kind of forget the old-fashioned procurement negotiation part because you have so much data and you end up with something, but what have you done? I'm not saying it is wrong, I'm just saying we shouldn't do one or the other. They need to work together in some part, and you brought up AI. I love AI, but we have so many AI agents now. I don't know. They don't talk to each other. They don't want to date at all. So we need to figure out some. I don't know, not mastermind, but it have to talk to each other. That's the whole idea.
I think you need to challenge us as well.
Yeah.
And you said that earlier. For me, there's so much data, but it's about credible, validated data. I think for me is going to be the critical tipping point, because you can't make decisions on stuff that isn't true.
Yep.
And I think as procurement professionals, that's the question. So how do you know it's true? What checks are you doing to make sure the information you're putting in front of me is accurate? And I think that's the next step as professionals we need to be doing. So I'll be getting lots more questions on this, I'm sure.
I can definitely understand the pain about the data for data and being a slave of them. And I was blessed with a previous line manager that within a week she slashed more than 80% of 3,000 reports, or it was more, she's here to say. And it was just within a week, actually, because she just checked and nobody was using them. But it is so powerful, it's so important, to Katie's point as well, that we need to have the actual data that we need in order this data to create the stories that will make us take these valuable decisions, either to replicate good practices or to mitigate any risks. And going back to the initial thought about the risk as part of the transparency in the supply chain and understanding where issues are. Since this is a risk, then what is this internal dynamic that does not allow the sustainable part, the sustainable attribute of the supply chains to be something more consistent and more higher in this business agenda? Because obviously if something goes wrong, there is a financial and non-financial impact. We have reputation, operations, performance, competitive advantage, market share, everything, the business as per se. So what is this internal dynamic that does not allow sustainable to be the standard? Katie, any thought?
Wow, what a question. I'd make a lot of money if I could answer that for every organisation. If I think about it, though, sustainability, it's not just your environmental team like it was years ago. It has to come from the top of an organisation. You have to have your leadership team bought into it, and not just signing pieces of paper, but actually physically bought into it and invested, because it does take investment up front to put these programmes in place, but actually the value that you get out of it and the risk mitigation in the longer term is really effective. Procurement, like I've said previously, it brings people together in an organisation. We have to be those change makers. We have to be the collaborators, not just with the suppliers, but across our organisations, bringing people together. Because unless everyone's involved in this, it's not actually going to make what's important, which is a proper impact, not just ticking boxes.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on. I think a good professional procurement team, if it's doing its job well, it's going to be like a calm pond of water. There's, very flat. Everything's being managed. We're identifying risks early. We're negotiating and maintaining really good competitiveness. And when you get to that level, the disruptions are down. We need to become better at other skills that procurement professionals might not necessarily be the strongest at. We need to become really good storytellers. We need to become really good journalists. We need to start broadcasting what are we doing to drive the sustainable supply chains. How can we be bringing that story into our businesses? I spend much time starting to do kind of podcasts and videos and just trying to explain the messages of how we can make our supply chain sustainable, and then what's the impact of it and why we do it. What's the actual reason behind us doing this, and communicating that internally. And it becomes the culture. If we can make the culture about asking for sustainable choices, then we can make some change.
I totally agree. I think we are there. So we do something called value proposed targets. So basically we have targets. So you have savings, you have avoidance, and et cetera, et cetera. We also have about the reduction in emissions. So we put that on quite a few vendors, and we also are working on it like constantly. So just 6 months ago, I put an intern on our Scope 3 emission total data. It's like, what can you do about this? And after 6 months, reduced it by 15%. But just using some of the data, reaching out to vendors, she didn't do any procurement, but she was using the database for procurement, because if they couldn't change, then the procurement team was set in to change the vendor. So we need to get to that point. It's very hands-on, but it's with 2,500 vendors, it's quite a big job, so you have to start somewhere. So that's, again, if you have the data, who's the worst in class, it's easier to start somewhere.
So obviously, training or sharing the value with our colleagues across the different departments is important at the same time is a challenge because we need to show them the why and why they should invest even their time in order to listen to us, in order to see how we can overcome the change management as well, because we know that procurement-wise, we already have these, let's say, habits or their concerns that don't change the supplier, don't touch this, and this is the scope that we already have in place, even if it was 8 years old. So let alone to start discussing now, adding the word sustainable, and let's change the scope in a sustainable way, or the specifications, or to see that we need to increase the supply chain pool in order to buy from someone else that is more compliant or more responsible, instead of what we already have in our supplier mix. And this is another challenge, I believe. How does this work in your internal discussions? Tom, you're laughing, so I will
I can start
with
on
you,
that
definitely.
one. Before I started in shipping, I was in heavy tech procurement, so total different change. But now we're actually trying to have agreements with vendors that are over more years than earlier. We take them closer to us. Earlier it was like, keep your distance, you just deliver what you have, cheapest amount, blah, 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 this and this. But now we actually bring them in. But longer term, they also have a security that if they do what's needed, they actually get the income and the yield that they need. So in that sense, that worked for us. But at the same time, we always have one in the drawer, as we say in Norway. So you always have number two. So if number two or one doesn't do what he or she or it should do, we always have someone to change it out with. We're never married to a vendor, but if we can work for long, if we can be professional and have a plan for how to reduce whatever emissions we have together, or better technology, or do something together. Okay. So totally different than the tech world.
I think yes, I really it's such an interesting one that
I like that. Obviously, you are thinking of stories that you may have had with colleagues and the challenges, and I see you smiling. So please share if you want.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's interesting. We talk about us choosing our vendors. What about the vendors choosing us?
That is my next question.
You know,
so for the moment, let's
I'll
start
say
with the internal. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but it's.
So we have internal clients. So what is happening with them? How can we ensure, as procurement supply chain professionals and with this sustainable attribute, how can we show them the value, how we can change this narrative?
I think there's some other questions at play for me, really, and that's about we're trying to build up a stance and a position and trying to communicate how we want to work sustainably. I really do like it when our suppliers come to us and say, well, what are you doing?
Yep.
You know, and they hold up the mirror to us and they say, what are your standards? We're asking them to meet certain EcoVadis standards or be part of the SEDEX and to show improvement. And I really enjoy it when we have that pushback to say, no, where are you, Accord Healthcare? What are you doing about it? Because that drives those discussions that then generate those discussions internally. It's something that I can bring to our executive teams and say, okay,
Yes,
what are we going to do? How are we going to stand up? How are we going to be different about this?
Yep.
I totally agree, and I also have an example I need to share. It's not in procurement, but it's in. We have a project that we want to build a zero emission ship. So C0 it's called. You can Google it if you want. And it's 12 companies working together. Nobody's paying the other one anything. But if you do something or make something that you can actually patent in the later, you can sell that on to other ships. So instead of one paying for the whole thing, which we couldn't have bear the cost for that, we all chip in. But the funny part, then a lot of the main, I won't say any names, but a lot of big companies coming, I want to be a part of this. Because you see an opportunity, maybe 10, 15 years down the road, but we can't be too many. And then they already they didn't want to do this in the beginning, they wanted to be paid for it, but then, okay, chuck them. Let's talk to other people. And if we all interest are to do something together, figure it out, have something to sell the next 15, that's how we want to work.
So Katie, before I go to the question that Tony shared, that How about you? Any internal discussions or things that you're seeing with your customers as part of their internal discussions?
Yeah, like I said, it's about bringing all the stakeholders together, and sustainability doesn't start when the procurement team receives a spec to go out to tender for. It starts right back at the beginning of the sort of the output spec that's given by a client or what you're deciding to do. And if you start to think about sustainability right at the beginning of that process and include it at every step, whether it's evaluation, ongoing contract management, or even sort of the end cost. So when you're exiting something, what are you doing to dispose of things as well? I think that's where we've got to get to, and we're nowhere near there, I would say, at the minute.
Absolutely, the holistic approach and the integration in all areas. So moving to the next.
I feel like I'm in trouble.
So after this, so what happens then externally? Because obviously there is, in the same way that we might have decided to be a responsible organization, and for X reasons we say, yes, we need to move to sustainable supply chains. What happens then with those supply chains? We have the cases that the suppliers may do better than we would expect, and they push, equally push to have sustainable, responsible customers, or who may not have so good suppliers, not to answer, and what happens with these cases as well, how we ensure this principles alignment. Tony, not you. Tom, not you yet.
This is a good one for
Waiting
Tony.
for this.
Yeah, he's been waiting. Yeah, you go ahead.
No, please.
No, Tom, please.
No, I didn't get all of it, but in that sense, how do you say it? I took many examples for on what we do in our company, which are small in this sense, of course, but due to our company is built up on basically sustainability, that's what we stand for. It's easy for us to see that when vendors come because they want to work with us as a company because it's actually really good branding, which helps us a lot. The only problem is that when people come and they say it's sustainable, but they're not, because the sustainability word is chucked out there left and right, and they don't mean it. I'll give an example. I was looking for a new office here in London, and the sales guy Sunday said that this is a carbon neutral building. I was like, okay, really? And then my colleagues from the UK like, don't tell the guy from Norway. He really digs into what do you mean by that. So we actually got a discount. We didn't take that lease, but we got a discount because I took him in a lie. That was kind of funny. So it's all about kind of ask the right questions to get there. It's a lot of risks. It's risks everywhere. So procurement or supply chain or call it whatever you want, need to be able to ask those questions to overcome that risk, from my point of view.
Katie?
Yeah, I think it's a good point you made around suppliers choosing you. It's an ever competitive market in the supply chain, and actually what is your supply chain is shifting in different markets at the minute. I was speaking with a team at Octopus, who are one of the biggest energy providers in the UK. They treat themselves as a data company. So actually really understanding what your supply chain is and collaborating with those that are the most important to you, but keeping an eye on what else is out there as well, I think is really critical, because there's so much going on, and they're so interconnected. I was chatting just before we came on stage, and the similarities between, a Sainsbury's supply chain, a construction supply chain, and an energy supply chain, the overlaps are there. And if you're not on top of your game, then your suppliers will start to pick someone else.
Absolutely. Tony?
I was just going to add about it's one of the other key pieces in this, and we call it collaboration. But how do we communicate with our suppliers? What do we want? And whether it's around sustainability, whether it's around governance, whatever the area we want to be, we know that when we communicate, we never give all of the information that we need to give, and all of the information is never received from the other side. So there's always these kind of blind spots that as humans we will automatically populate and fill it in and have our own understandings from that. So I guess my learning, how I want to see us take it forward in the future is to over-communicate how our sustainable supply chains are going to be working, and really emphasize this point. I think they say you have to tell somebody 7 times for them to memorize it and take it on board. So I want us to be communicating 7 times to our suppliers. What are we expecting from them? and what can they expect from us to drive a sustainable supply chain.
What have you seen as a main challenge or challenges overall through what we discussed? Because we touched ethical sourcing, we touched risks, we touched internal dynamics. What else are you facing as a day-to-day or even more overarching as challenges in order to ensure that we can have sustainable supply chains? Tony?
Sorry,
No,
that's one of the most important questions for us, to be honest. It can be everything from taxes to governmental rules to whatnot. From our point of view, it's about being competitive in a market which is pretty hard at the moment. So, for example, our ships are running in Norway, but then lots of ships are coming into Norway, which don't have the same regulation about what kind of fuel type you have, or taxations, or salaries for who's working on the ships, as in the S and the SG. So it's so many levers. So it's how, if we're going to put lots of money down on sustainability, we need to know that we are competitive in the market by being on similar terms as the ones that are not coming from the same area. So I think the most challenging part for us is regulations, country by country or area by area.
Multi-jurisdictional is obviously an issue. Yes, you're right. Tony?
I think in a procurement world, the desire to put out the fires is really strong in a procurement professional. We love something going wrong. Right, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix this. And we almost spend our time seeking out these issues, and we know it's a human weakness that's part of those cases. When we're doing that, we are not thinking about, well, how can I make this more sustainable? And I guess one of the biggest challenges we have is to bring everybody back to that strategic goal of, if we have a supply chain that's strategically compliant, it's sustainable, and we have that transparency within it, that is going to give us a much better market position. That's going to mean that our medicines are on shelf when patients need it, and that means that throughout our supply chain, that transparency means we know what's happening within them. So I think I guess you could call them magnets that are trying to pull us away from what we're trying to achieve and to stay as focused as we can.
Thank you. That's a great point. Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, I'd just say stay true to yourself as an organisation when you decide where you're going, because regulations, as we've seen across the last few years, change like the weather, and rhetoric changes politically like the weather. So for me, as an organisation, same as when you come up with your values for your organisation and your people, pick what you're going to do and do it really well, and then you will have that competitive edge because you'll be consistent and you'll be ahead of the game.
Thank you so much, all of you. And if I could just share one more thought, that it is not mine, but I like that, is that sustainable procurement is not expensive, but procurement is. So with this, if there are any questions?
Yes, indeed. Thank you all very much. Are there any questions from the floor? Wow, you've done such a good job. I've got a question. I was going to ask
It's
Katie.
one in the back.
Oh, all right. Much more important than my question.
Thanks. I think this is mainly for Tom, but I mean, welcome for anyone to answer it. You mentioned about setting reduction targets with your suppliers around emissions, but also touched on the data issue of like having accurate emissions data that you can rely on. How do you think about that when you're trying to set a target for a supplier, but are you only doing it for suppliers where you trust the data that they're giving you already? Yep.
You kind of gave the answer yourself on that, but you're completely right. And that's why I told about the intern that has 6 months on the data, just to validate where can we put the targets. An example of that is we're buying fuel, and it's a rule in the regulation you have to have 6%. It's a long story. But we buy more than we have to, so we pay about 20% more than we have to on fuel. But because it's spend-based, we actually get a worse situation of data due to that, versus the one that buy black oil, as I call it. They get a benefit because we're kind of stealing away the emissions from that company. So it's actually the opposite way. That's why I'm saying some of the data just, you really have to be in the numbers to get them correct. And then you can put the targets on them.
Thank you. Another question at the back. I'm not going to get to ask my one.
So Tom, this one is for you. Shipbuilding is a very intensive capital-based industry, and I don't think we have figured out what sustainability truly really means, because sustainability is not free.
Yep.
And there's a cost to sustainability, which I think we're all starting to find out. Shipbuilding industry could be very intense, from a small yacht that could be less than a year, to a cruise line that could be 1 to 3 years, to an LNG carrier that could be 10 to 15 years, right? If you're building your assumptions based on your regulations that are in process today, and if your ship is not ready to be delivered 3 years from now, so zero emissions by 2030 is what you guys are thinking about.
Yep.
How do you course correct if there's a challenge that comes in from a regulation side?
Very good question. Very ship related, so that's good. I'll take a few years back. I didn't work in the company then, but before COVID, we're going to convert our ships to LNG. But due to the whole thing about yards and where could we go, etc., we stopped that and then did the hybridization instead. So what's coming in 2030, that's the difficult part. That's why it's companies working together, which one can't pay for the whole thing. You all have to invest their time and technology, and how can we enhance this to be able to build something by 2030. But it's getting close. I totally agree with you. So the ship has been designed in multiple ways, and it's changing as the technology are being made, to be honest. So it's a whole website for it if you're interested in that. We can have a chat later.
I'm just curious what fuel you were going to use for that.
It's going to be all electricity. But due to that, then we need shore power. We need shore power in 35 ports. And then we need regulations for all up and down the coast, and it's many things. So even the harbors are a part of the project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Tom, Tony, Katie, and Irini for a great panel discussion there. That's about all we've got time for on this conversation, but we'll have our next discussion in just 5 minutes. That's unlocking the true value of supplier relationships beyond costs. So thank you for joining us for this one, and hopefully see you in 5 minutes. A round of applause for our panel.